Maki is a dog-faced loser who has no bros or hoes because he ignores everyone to play video games. However, everything changes when he accidentally rizzes up the popular girl and they start having secret home dates until they fall in love. It all begins on the first day of school when Maki sits quietly in class because he's an antisocial loner who doesn't want any attention. However, his worst fears become reality as the teacher calls him to give an introduction, making him shiver like a leaf. The teacher asks about his hobbies, so he reveals that he spends his weekends alone playing video games and watching shark movies, but this makes everyone see him as a weird loser, except for a purple-haired baddie named Umi. After he sits, the teacher calls a gorgeous baddie named Amami to introduce herself, and as she does, everyone in class is amazed that she's as interesting as she is beautiful. When she's done with her intro, she starts pressuring her bestie, Umi, to give her introduction, and the teacher picks Umi as well, so she finally stands up. She introduces herself as Amami's longtime friend while throwing strays at the blonde airhead, and as they bicker, all the boys in class gossip about their plans to goon and simp for these elite baddies, but Maki doesn't care because he knows they're out of his league. As the days pass, Maki's classmates avoid him because his intro exposed him as a worthless incel, so he spends school hours alone and plays video games at home on days off. However, this doesn't bother him much because even though he low-key dreams about having friends, he's spent so much time alone that he's learned to get by without anyone else around him. One day in class, Maki eavesdrops while Omi shows Amami a movie she plans to watch, but Amami complains that it looks boring. However, after they leave class, Maki realizes that he doesn't find Omi's movie taste weird at all. After school, Maki heads to the store to buy a discount version of The Last of Us, but he suddenly runs into Umi, who greets him cheerfully. Maki is surprised that she's there because he heard her clearly stating her plans earlier that day, but she jokingly calls him a bad boy for eavesdropping. However, Umi gives him the shock of his life by revealing that her real plan for the day is to talk to him, but this confuses him. So she shows him a note she wrote on the first day of school, which states that she wants to become friends with him because they're kindred spirits who love games and movies. She then asks him to give her a recommendation for a thriller movie, and after he does, they spend several minutes yapping about their favorite shark movies. Several days later, the two of them have become good friends, but they're keeping it secret from everyone, so Omi sends a text to Maki in the school hallway, asking to hang out with him at his house later. After school, they both arrive at Maki's place, and as Maki calls out the Wingstop order he made for them, Umi says it in perfect unison with him, making them realize that they have the same taste in food as well. As they eat the food, Maki challenges Umi to a round of Call of Duty, and she confidently claims that she'll shoot off his danglers in the game, but she ends up losing miserably, so she gets salty and asks to play another game. After spending several hours playing games together, Umi says it's time for her to leave, so they start cleaning up together, but Maki suddenly freezes while watching her and says he doesn't understand how she maintains her hourglass body figure despite being a foodie like him. Umi explains that she works out harder than Ashton Hall at the gym and starts teasing him for having a lot of belly fat. On her way out, Umi suggests going out with Maki next weekend because she wants to coach him on how to have fun outside, but Maki is nervous about it because even though their friendship is secret, he still feels too pathetic to hang out with one of the prettiest girls in class. However, she assures him that she'll make sure they don't get found out even if they run into any of their classmates, and advises him to enjoy the experience to the fullest. During dinner that evening, Maki tells his mom that he's hanging out with a friend the next weekend, and this makes her so happy that she celebrates with Fortnite dances and hands him enough money to buy an iPhone 17 for the date. The next day, Maki is about to have lunch in his secret spot, but he hears someone giving a love speech to a girl, so he runs away to give them privacy. However, he bumps into Amame and another of their classmates named Nina, who reveals that the girl being confessed to is Umi. This makes him interested, so he joins them in eavesdropping, and they watch along as the guy asks Umi to be his girlfriend. The three eavesdroppers hold their breath in anticipation, but Umi bluntly rejects the loser and explains that she isn't interested in dating anyone at the moment. This doesn't surprise Nina and Amami at all because they know that it's nearly impossible to get Umi to say yes, and they gossip about how the dude has less riz than a broomstick. To clarify things, Amami explains that the guy has asked her out before, and Yu says it's pretty messed up but asks her why she's eavesdropping, which makes her explain that Umi is her best friend. Meanwhile, Umi starts walking away, but that dude doesn't take the hint and asks to be her friend with benefits, but she rejects him even more coldly this time. Seeing this, Nina leaves the hiding spot because the telenovela drama is over, but Amami apologizes to Maki for dragging him into their girly nonsense and surprisingly, gives him her number. Maki is completely bamboozled, but instead of explaining, she asks him to call her and keep their friendship a secret before running off. Later that day, Maki is chilling with Umi at his house, and he tells her about how he eavesdropped on her love confessions scene earlier. But she doesn't get mad because she feels it'll help their friendship even more. When he asks if she's popular, she says she isn't as popular as Amami, and asks if he's jealous, but he explains that it sounds like a pain because being popular means all the background characters will approach her to make friendships with her, and she has to fend off the ones she doesn't like. He admits that being a loner sucks, but claims that it's better than having to deal with the pressure of popularity, and even though Umi understands where he's coming from, she teases him for being an overthinker. However, she says it's what she likes about him, and just when Bro starts getting his hopes up, she clarifies that she only likes him as a friend, so he returns the favor by telling her the same thing, and the two of them troll each other until they decide to settle things with a round of Street Fighter. Following this, the week passes uneventfully as usual, and eventually the day of Ami and Maki's date arrives. In class, Nina asks Umi if he has a secret boyfriend since she hasn't been hanging out much with her and Mami anymore, and Mami tries to defend her but starts acting insecure as well, so Umi playfully chops her in the head and tells Nina to cut it out. After school, Maki is at their agreed-upon spot, staring anxiously at the mirror because he feels his Temu outfit looks too cheap, but Umi suddenly arrives and teases him for wearing all black, so he explains that it keeps him cool. She decides to let it slide for the day, and advises him to think about color schemes next time, because the outfit makes him stick out like a sore thumb, but he's surprised that there's going to be a next time. As they walk together, Maki asks Umi why she came early for their date, and this makes her flustered, so she explains that she didn't want him to wait long since she knew he'd come earlier. They soon arrive at a store, and Umi points out that it has a lot of girly things, so Maki starts to regret bringing her there, but she says she's happy about getting to explore a new kind of place because Amami and her other friends never took her to places like that. As Maki tries to reply, she stops him and asks him to call her by her given name since they've been friends for a while, but when he asks her to do the same, she says they aren't that close yet, so he calls her an idiot. Shortly after, the two of them are eating king-sized burgers at the nearest McDonald's branch, and Maki asks Umi about a movie she's seen recently, so she narrates a low-budget Bleach movie where Ichigo is a shark. Maki shows interest in the movie, so she decides that they'll watch it next week, and he agrees. However, he asks if she has to make plans with him every week, so she explains that he doesn't have to worry about Amami and the others because she hangs out with them every Friday. Suddenly, some students recognize Umi and start gossiping about how she's a big shot for rejecting the dude with the biggest eggplant in school, so Umi suddenly starts acting like Maki is her boyfriend, which shocks them. Maki's two brain cells can't comprehend what's going on, so she kicks him on the leg, making him feed her a fry, which convinces the salty hose that he's her boyfriend. However, the girls start trash-talking him, and Umi stands up to defend him, but Maki tells her to calm down because he only cares what she thinks of him. Following this, they spend the next several hours having fun while playing arcade games together, and when it's time to leave, Umi tells Maki to wait for her on a bench while she heads to the ladies' room. After she leaves, Amami suddenly arrives with her friend group, but Maki calls Umi so that she'd be able to hear their conversation. However, Amami invites Maki to join her group in having fun, but Maki explains that he can't join them because he feels he'll ruin their vibe, and he already has plans to hang out with someone else. Shortly after, Umi and Maki are on a train together, and she tells him about how she came after him because she wanted a friend she could talk about her hobbies with. She then shows him a message from Umi where she says she made Maki mad and pats his head while he falls asleep. The next day at school, Amami apologizes to Maki for making an odd request, and he accepts, so she asks to meet with him later that day. However, the dim-witted princess realizes that she just exposed their secret friendship, so she runs away, and Maki gets a text from Umi, inviting him to hang out together. After school, they meet at Maki's house and apologize to Umi for keeping their friendship from her, so she flicks them on the head. Amami then apologizes to Maki for the other day, and after he accepts, she asks him to be her friend. The next day, Amami greets Maki cheerfully in class, but Maki is bothered because the entire class is staring at them, so she asks him why he's being distant. Seeing this, Nina asks Amami why she's suddenly sharing screen time with a pathetic virgin. So Amami explains that they become friends, but their classmates start spreading rumors, claiming that Maki blackmailed her into accepting his friendship. As Nina pesters Amami with questions, Maki gets a text from Umi, where she apologizes for Amami's daftness, and he sees her gesturing an apology as well. During lunch hours, Amami finds a spot in the yard for them, and Omi agrees that it's a perfect spot because it has good sunlight and places to sit. As Maki wipes the table, he remembers when Amami suddenly asked him to eat lunch with her, but everyone in class started freaking out, so Umi whispered to her that it was a bad idea. However, Amami explained that Maki would prefer eating alone with her since he's an antisocial dweeb, but Maki said he'd be too nervous about it, so Amami invited Umi to join them, and Maki agreed to the arrangement. In the present, Amami fawns over how amazing Maki's lunch looks, so he gives her some omelette to try out and explains that he made the lunch himself because his mom was busy. When she tries the food, she says it tastes just as amazing as Johnny Sins' white sauce, so Umi asks to have a try as well. Once she does, her brain suddenly shuts down, and when Maki asks what she thinks, she says it's unfairly good. Maki tells them about some elite desserts he made, but reality hits Amami like a hollow purple blast, as she realizes that she can never measure up to his homemaking skills. However, Maki says it's pretty easy because he learned to cook through YouTube tutorials and ChatGPT, but she starts craving pancakes, so he offers to make some for her. This makes her so happy that she holds his hand while asking him to come over after school for the pancakes, and he agrees, so she invites Umi as well. After she leaves, Umi asks Maki if he's getting any heat because of his friendship with Amami, but he says everything is chill so far, so she tells him to inform her if anything happens. Maki claims that it'll be fine, and Umi agrees while calling her the prettiest girl in class. Hearing this, Maki remembers that their classmates have labeled Amami as the prettiest girl in class, and Omi as the second prettiest, so he tells her not to be bummed out by it since it's just degenerate yapping. However, Umi says it's accurate to her and claims that Maki will also come to love her soon because she has a cheerful personality to match her beauty, but Maki wonders if she means he'll love her as a friend. After school, they arrive at Maki's home, where he serves them some pancakes, and after taking a bite, Amami starts glazing Maki again, claiming he's better than Gordon Ramsay. As Umi eats her pancakes, Amami teases her for something that happened between them during the last Valentine's Day, and this catches Maki's attention, so Umi explains that they gave each other friendship chocolate during the last Valentine's Day. This makes him remember that they went to an all-girls school together called Tachibana Girls' School, which is just as bougie as Harvard, but he doesn't understand why they both applied for another high school. Shortly afterwards, they play video games together, and Maki is surprised that Amami is already doing great despite it being her first time, so she explains that she can adapt better than Blue Lock's wannabe egoist. She ends up smoking both of them using a surprise technique, so Maki approaches her to learn her move, and Umi low-key feels jealous as she watches them. On the way home, Amami tells Umi that she wants to treat Maki to something, but Umi tells her she won't tag along with them because she knows Amami wants to get closer to him. However, after calling him to make plans, Amami says Maki rejected her offer, claiming that he has plans with someone else, so Umi tells her she forgot her phone while rushing back to his place. Once she arrives, she twists Maki's nose with her face glowing red like a stop sign and tells him she's looking forward to meeting him the next day. The following day, Umi and Maki are playing video games together while talking about zombie movies, but Umi suddenly shuts off the television and suggests that they head to his room to read some novels together. While reading the novel, Umi is so moved that she starts crying while geeking out about the love story, and afterwards, she asks for the other volumes, so they spend hours reading them together. As Maki stands up to get coffee for her, he notices that she's already drifted to the dream world, so he starts admiring her cute sleeping face before dozing off as well. When he wakes up, his mom scolds him for bringing a girl to his room, thinking he wore her out with backstrokes, so he explains everything to her. After she informs Umi's mom, she informs Umi that her mom has agreed to let her stay over at their place because she's working late and offers her some pajamas. So Umi thanks her and runs away. However, Maki's mom drags him back to give him the belt, so he explains to her that they're just friends. After freshening up, Umi meets Maki in his room, where she promises to tell Amami about their friendship at the right time. The next morning, Umi takes Maki to her home and introduces him to her mom, Sora, who tells them to keep her in the loop next time. The next day in school, the teacher presents a lottery to determine the representative for the upcoming festival, and Maki ends up picking the winning ballot, so everyone starts making fun of him. Even though this annoys Umi, she stops herself from hulking out, but suddenly, Amami goes to the front of the class and asks everyone why they hate Maki. After giving a passionate speech about how they all hate Maki for no reason, she tells the teacher that she wants to volunteer for the female rep position because she wants to work with Maki, so the teacher asks Maki if he's okay with it. Maki says he's fine with it, but Omi suddenly reveals that she pulled the ballot for female rep, and this shocks Amami. Umi explains to the teacher that she's completely okay with taking the role because she has time on her hands, but Amami tries to grab the ballot from her hand. So she adjusts the blondie's pebble-sized brain with a playful karate chop and tells her to calm down. She then shows Amami that she went too far because her speech sapped all the self-esteem from their classmates. So Amami apologizes to everyone for crashing out and also apologizes to Maki for giving him more spotlight than he's worth. Since everyone has calmed down, Umi cheerfully tells the class that she and Maki will be their festival reps and asks for their full cooperation. Shortly after, Maki praises Umi for being a better speaker than Trump, but Umi says Amami is more amazing because she marched in front of the class without caring if she was ruining the vibes to express anger on another person's behalf. However, Umi claims that she could never pull it off herself because she always prioritizes positive vibes more than anything else. Just then, the student council president, Seki, walks into the room and announces that they're in a meeting of the school's festival executive committee for that year, but Maki silently decides that he'll do his best as rep so his haters can shut their smelly mouths. After school, Amami meets up with Umi and thanks her for stopping her, because she would have said nastier things if she hadn't, but Umi thanks her as well for using talk no jutsu to get their stupid classmates on the same page. The next day, Umi announces that their class has been chosen to handle that decor, and all the noodle brains start yelling in protest, so she sweetens up the arrangement by promising that Nina and Amami will do some OnlyFans cosplay for them. When Amami asks why she isn't joining them, she explains that she'll be the producer, and they plan to exploit her and Nina to get the top spot in the popularity rankings. Umi then asks the class for decor ideas, and as expected, all the brain-dead losers can't muster up a single idea, but Maki raises his hand for a suggestion. After the meeting, Umi praises Maki for his plan to make mosaic art using cans, but he thanks the heavens that Umi is his partner because his brain would have short-circuited mid-speech if it were anyone else. However, Umi drops a bombshell, revealing that she never actually won the lottery, and even though she cheated, he calls her amazing for successfully scamming their class like a Nigerian prince and draws the winner mark on her empty ballot paper before handing it back to her. Shortly afterwards, Maki and Umi are planning to make drawings that are superior to Oda's, but Amami suddenly arrives and complains that all the cans she gathered have cigarettes in them, so they decide to wash them later. When she sees the image they're drawing, she offers to draw it, and once she finishes, Maki is so amazed by her skills that he asks if she's a reincarnation of Picasso, but she explains that it's just a hobby of hers. Even though Umi is drowning in jealousy, she decides to put Amami in charge of drawings, and they all agree to the idea. They spend the next few days practicing the drawings together, and on a certain day, Umi brags to some of her friends that Amami's art is already better than the Mona Lisa. The girls thank her for calming things down the other day in class, but she says it's no problem and asks them to cooperate with Maki since he's doing his best. That evening, as Maki does research, he can't get Umi out of his mind, so he calls her to bond with him over food and games while they go over festival plans together. Hearing this, she teases him, asking him to man up and tell her that he misses her, but the wimp tries to end the call, so she stops him and tells him she'll come over because she misses him. Just then, Amami shows up and asks Umi what's going on, so she lies that she has to get home to watch One Piece. Soon after, Umi arrives at Maki's place, and she's amazed by the level of progress he's made in her absence. As they chill together, Umi suddenly rests her head on Maki's shoulders, and just when she's about to shoot her shot, they hear the doorbell ring. When Maki opens the door, he sees Amami, who calls Umi to come out because she knows she was lying, and when Maki asks how she figured them out, she explains that Umi has been making a lot of excuses to ditch her friends recently. Amami then asks Umi why she didn't tell her about her friendship with Maki despite their close bond, but Umi says she didn't want to tell her about it and leaves in a way that makes Amami worried. However, days later, Maki is shocked to see the two of them walking cheerfully together, as if nothing had happened, but he's still worried about Umi's feelings, so he calls her to meet in a private room, where she suddenly grabs him from behind while telling him that she'll explain everything after the festival. On the day of the festival, the students have fun together and display their awesome mosaic art in its full glory. Afterwards, Amami meets Maki and Umi with two girls whom she claims are their longtime friends, but Umi reveals that they don't see her as a friend at all, and decides to tell everyone about her inferiority complex. Years ago, Umi was walking with the two girls, and she saw Amami walking alone, so she hurried away to meet her on a bench, where Amami was crying her eyes out and introduced herself to her. She then sat beside her and asked her why she was alone, so Amami explained that people had always avoided her because they hated the fact that her eyes and hair were different from everyone else. As she cried, Umi stretched out her hand to her and offered to walk home with her from that day forward, and that was how they became friends. The next day, Umi introduced Mami to her two friends, and they immediately started glazing her because of her charming looks. So Mami thanked Umi for helping her make two new friends. Years later, Mami hugged Umi cheerfully after seeing that they were in the same class together, but their two friends, Sane and Manaka, didn't end up with them, so she offered to treat them to lunch to cheer them up. Later that day, Mami introduced herself in class with a cheerful smile, which made everyone flock around her afterwards, and even though Umi could pull it off as well, she simply watched from afar because she didn't like being the center of attraction. She then heard some NPCs talking about how people could brag about being friends with a gorgeous queen like Mame, but at the time, she didn't fully understand the implications of what they were saying. However, she eventually caught on when they hit their year, and she noticed that girls started trash-talking her because they were envious of the fact that she was the bestie of the school's queen. One day, Umi asked Sane and Manaka to join her and Amami for a group cinema trip, but they declined, saying they had plans that day. However, on her way to the theater, she saw them hanging out with Amami without her, which made her freeze in shock. During their hangout, Amami said she wished Umi could join them, but Sane and Manaka lied that she declined their offer to hang out because she was too busy playing with her cookie, but they had no idea that Umi was listening from behind a bush. In the present, Amami is shocked after finally hearing the truth, and Umi explains that the reason she transferred schools was that she wanted to escape it all, but Amami ended up following her. Hearing this, Amami reminds Umi that she's her number one, even though she cares about the other girls, and Umi admits that she's glad to hear that, but also points out that it's hurting her. Umi then revealed that she talked to Sane and Manaka about the incident during their graduation, and they explained that they wanted to get closer to Amame than her. She explains to Amami that their classmates always looked at her with envy because she was the only one Amami called a friend, and then points out that all the girls who started talking to her first eventually started talking to just Amami. Hearing this, Maki asks if it's why she didn't tell Amami about their friendship, so she confirms that it is and explains that she didn't want him to take the one friend she made for herself. She then asks Amami if she likes her, and Amami says she loves her, but Umi replies that she hates Amami and loves her at the same time before running off to cool her head. Minutes later, Maki meets Umi alone in the class and tells her she's amazing for keeping all her feelings bottled in for so long, and she asks him to give her more credit, so he pats her on the head. Meanwhile, Nina meets Amami on the roof and asks her what's on her mind. So Mami tells her that she's decided to be more mindful. In class, Umi feels horrible because she ruined her friendship with Mami, and she wonders how she can fix it. So Maki suggests that she give him some space to prioritize fixing her relationship with Mami. This surprises her, so he tries to explain, but she shuts his mouth and asks him if he'd miss her if she keeps away from him. He admits that he'd miss her but also says he wants her to make up with Mami, so she thanks him for expressing his feelings. Afterwards, they hold hands while heading to the roof together, and once they arrive, Maki tells Amami that Maki is her close friend and apologizes for not telling her sooner. However, Amami starts crying while calling her an idiot for scaring her into thinking their friendship is over, and Umi apologizes for making her feel that way, so they hug each other. Umi then tells Amami that she's taking a break from Maki to forge a closer friendship with her, and Maki tells her that he supports the idea, but Amami bluntly refuses because she doesn't want Maki to feel bad, and she proposes that they do something for her instead. However, she asks them to hold hands while enjoying the festival together, and they fulfill her request, even while drowning in embarrassment. After having fun in a haunted house, Umi and Maki admire their mosaic art from a distance, and they feel that they could actually win the competition. Later that day, the two of them are hanging out in Maki's home, and Mami is watching them while disguised as a ghost because part of her deal was that she'd watch them bond during one of their secret meetings. However, Umi asks her for permission to keep seeing him on Fridays, so she agrees and hugs her before leaving. Later that evening, the lovebirds are still playing video games, but Maki starts coughing, so Umi makes him share a blanket with her, which makes both of them flustered. Maki then confesses to Umi that she looks prettier than anyone when she smiles, so she teases him by telling him he likes her. On her way out, Umi asks Maki if he likes her, but he chickens out and throws the question back at her. However, she gives him the shock of his life by kissing his cheek and saying she loves him, and she tells him she'll save the kiss on the lips for when he admits he likes her. The next morning, Maki has a nightmare where his parents are arguing, and they suddenly vanish after Thanos snaps his fingers in Infinity War. When he wakes up, He wonders why he's having that dream since he hasn't had it since he started high school. When he heads downstairs, he gets a text from his mom, informing him that she won't be around that evening, and he gets flustered when he remembers Umi telling him she loves him. He realizes that he loves Umi as well, but even though he wants to let her know that he's seen firsthand, through his parents' marriage, that couples can fall out of love with each other. Even though her confession made him happy, he's sad because he feels he's not a good fit for her, but he suddenly gets a cheerful text from Ome, so he decides that he'll do his best, so he'll be able to proudly call her his girlfriend someday. Shortly afterwards, the lovebirds are walking to school together, and Umi asks Maki if the reason he's delaying his response is that he's keeping her as a backup, but says it isn't and apologizes for making her feel that way. She then starts teasing him by threatening to cut off his love bone if he simps for anyone else, but Maki still feels depressed, so she pats him on the back and tells him to cheer up so he'll become a man worthy of her. When she notices that his lips are flaky, she applies her lip balm to them, and the virgin is shocked that she just casually gave him his first indirect kiss, but she teases him and reveals that she just used a new balm on him. As they walk ahead, Umi takes her teasing to the next level by promising to apply some balm to his trouser snake when they make some romantic progress. Minutes later, they arrive in class, and Nina asks Maki how his job as festival rep went, so he reveals to her that their mosaic art won a special prize after the festival because the students loved it. As Nina tries to ask Maki about his relationship with Umi, Umi suddenly spawns behind her like a horror movie villain and puts her in a headlock submission, which makes her pass out. When Umi returns to her seat, Mami asks her if she's tasted Maki's popsicle, and this makes her flustered, but she explains that nothing has happened between them yet. During class, Umi and Maki are texting each other, and Maki asks her if she can spend Christmas Eve with him, but she crushes his hopes of bedroom bouncing by saying she already has plans. Later that day, a dude asks Mami to come to his place and drink his natural Christmas eggnog, but she rejects his offer, saying she already plans to hang out with her friends, and she also has someone she likes. Meanwhile, Maki, Umi, and Nina are eavesdropping from the corner, and Nina suggests going to meet her, but Maki fears that she'd find out about them, so Umi explains that Mami already knows they're watching. As the girls meet up with Mami, Maki remembers that they're renting out part of the local civic center to host a party in collaboration with other schools in the area, and the deadline to sign up for it was at the start of the term. However, back then, he ignored the whole thing because he wasn't friends with Umi, but now that he has a chance at cracking her, he feels that it was the dumbest mistake he ever made. During lunch, he tells the girls that he couldn't register for the party and advises them to have fun together, but Nina interrupts by revealing she won't be hanging out with the girls because she's coming with her boyfriend. As they eat together, they have no idea that the senior from earlier, Seki, is watching Maki from the window above, and after the meal, Maki finds himself in a confrontation with him. Maki fears that he's about to get devious backshots from Seki's black henchman, but instead, Seki begs him for some tips on how to rizz up Mami. They later meet on a roof, where Seki explains that he fell in love at first sight with Mami at the entrance ceremony, and he begs Maki to be his friend so he can introduce him to Mami and invite him to their Christmas party as a pal. However, Maki turns him down, so Seki apologizes for dragging him out there and admits that he now has a bit of respect for him since he could say no to his request. On the way home, Umi tells Maki that she's a bit worried about the Christmas party because one of the schools joining is Tachibana Girls' School, which Sane and Manaka attend, and she decides that she'll just leave after eating the party food. However, she tells Maki that the party ends at 9, so he decides that he'll keep some snacks while waiting for her after the party. Later that evening, Maki has coffee with his mom, and he tells her about plans on Christmas Eve to meet with Umi. However, the next morning, Mami suddenly asks Maki to let her join their hangout on Christmas Eve, so Umi explains that she told the blondie about their plans the previous night. Later in class, Seki asks Mami to speak alone with him, so she follows him out to the yard, and Maki watches from afar while she rejects him once again. Shortly afterwards, Maki meets with Seki on the roof and asks him what he's going to do now that Mami has rejected him, and he decides to finally give up, but asks Maki about his relationship with Umi. After Maki explains it, Seki advises him to be careful not to lose her since guys from other classes are starting to get interested in her, and they decide to become friends. That evening, Maki asks Umi to watch a movie with him that Saturday, and she agrees but decides that they'd go shopping on Friday to get him some proper clothes. That Friday, Amami is having a fun time with Umi and Maki during the shopping trip, but when he goes to take a leak, he suddenly bumps into his dad, Itsuki. When Itsuki asks what he's doing there, Maki explains that he's shopping there, so Itsuki apologizes for not making time to see him again since the previous summer. Itsuki then reveals that he's there for work because he has a new client there, so Maki tells him to take care of himself since it sounds stressful. However, the deadbeat pats him on the head and tells him that he's built for this, but his assistant, Kyoka, arrives, so he introduces Maki to him as his son. Just then, Maki gets a text from Moon, asking him to stop wasting too much time gooning, so he explains to Itsuki that he has friends to meet before leaving. While walking ahead, Maki remembers the day Itsuki apologized to him and left to get milk after a heated argument with his mom, Masaki, but he eventually reunites with the girls. Hours later, Maki is distracted with deep thoughts during the hangout, but Ome karate chops him back to reality and scolds him for spacing out in the middle of their fun, so he explains that he's a little worn out. Amami and Umi start arguing over whose food has the most calories, but Maki advises them to eat some veggies so they won't get the body shape of Peter Griffin. While watching the two girls have fun together, Maki decides to forget about all the pain he went through the previous year because he's sure he'll make good memories with both of them that year. The next morning, Maki puts on his new fit, which makes him look like a youth pastor, but Umi suddenly arrives for their date, so he gawks at her cute outfit until she reminds him that it's cold outside. After letting her in, Maki gives Umi some coffee, but she notices that he can't take his eyes off her thick thighs, so he points out that her outfit is too loose for the winter season. She says she regrets picking the outfit on the way there, but also admits that she wants her boy toy to admire her, and the reason she came to his house instead of their date spot is that she couldn't wait to see him. While striking a pose, she asks him what he thinks of her outfit, and Maki tells her she's cuter than all Disney princesses combined, which makes her glad she put effort into her fashion. As they walk through the street together, Umi locks hands with her man, and also teases that his hands are sweaty from too much toilet stroking, so he tries to take his hand away, but she drags him back and says he isn't going anywhere. Maki realizes that they look like a typical young couple trying too hard, and it's all because Umi dresses him up, but he doesn't want anyone to make fun of the outfit he wears while they're on dates together, so he asks her to keep coaching him on things. They soon arrive at the cinema, where Umi booked a couple's seat for them, and when they sit, she immediately starts cuddling him, so he asks what she's doing. She explains that it's a normal thing to do on couple seats, since everyone else is doing it, and then starts teasing him for being shy. As the movie starts, Umi asks Maki what he'd do if some of their classmates spotted them like that, but he doesn't answer. After the movie, Maki trolls Umi for dozing off 30 minutes into the movie, so she explains that the movie is worse than the new Fast and Furious, and points out that they'd have enjoyed the experience more if they had gone for a Bloody Shark Terminator movie instead. Soon after, they're leaving a restaurant after enjoying some treats there, and Maki says he liked their food, but they both cheerfully complain that the portions were too small. Umi then suggests going to a karaoke joint, but Maki stops and explains that he's nervous because he's never been to karaoke before. However, she promises to make his first time fun and drags him inside, where he performs a song, and Maki praises her, saying she's already better than Billie Eilish. The karaoke scoreboard gives her a 98%, and this makes her happy because she hasn't sung out loud in a while. However, when she asks Maki to sing, he declines because he doesn't have a good voice, so Umi offers to make things easier by singing with him. She then hands him a microphone, and when the music starts, she starts dancing cheerfully, so he finally opens up and sings with her. After leaving the karaoke joint, Umi praises Maki for being a good singer, but he thanks her because it was the first time he's ever sung in front of anyone, and she made it special for him. As they sit together, Umi starts getting cold, so she cuddles Maki and asks what he thinks of her. However, the wimp still hasn't grown any marbles, so she tells him to whisper his answer to her so that nobody can hear. As he leans in to tell her, she shifts back because his breath tickles her, but he suddenly spots Itsuki acting close with Kyuka, so he tells her they need to leave before he spots them because he feels he'll only be a bother if he greets them. However, Umi suddenly hugs him and tells him to be quiet because they're walking towards them, and after they leave, Maki apologizes to Umi for putting her in a tough spot. Later that evening, Maki returns home and meets Masaki, who asks about his date, so he tells her about everything fun that happened, but left out the part of him seeing Itsuki. Masaki then asks if he'll be free that day, but he says he'll have exams that day, so she explains that his dad wanted to see him even though it's a bad time for him. He then asks her if she still loves Itsuki, and she says she still loves him deep down, even though they're divorced, which is why she hasn't been able to throw away their family album. After freshening up, Maki and Masaki look through some photos in their family album together, and Maki decides that he won't tell Masaki about his dad's new relationship to protect her feelings as well as his own. The next day, Umi is at Maki's home, admiring some old photos of him with his mom, and when he comes out, she starts teasing him, so he scolds both of them. Shortly afterwards, Masaki sends Maki a voice note, telling him to bring her smokes and lighters downstairs, so he delivers them to her but sees that her eyes are baggy from all the stress, which makes him understand why she takes her smoke breaks. After packing up the joint, Masaki tells Maki not to expose too much of their family situation to Umi, and even though he knows she already saw his dad's new side chick, he promises her that he won't. While having breakfast together, Maki tells Umi that he's going to meet his dad on Friday for dinner, and when she mentions Kyoka, Maki says he plans to ask her about it because he wouldn't feel right about leaving things as they are. He also wants to hit the books very hard before going, so he asks Umi when everyone's free to have a study session together, and she decides that they'll begin that day. During lunch period at school, Maki asks Amami if it's okay for Seki to join them for their study group, and she gleefully agrees because she wants more people to enjoy the experience. During their study session, Seki asks Ume where she usually ranks on exams, and Amami responds on her behalf that she gets single digits when she's on her game, so Ume karate chops her. When he asks Maki, the bum reveals that he usually scores around 50th like a typical average Joe, and this makes Seki bummed out because he definitely won't end up in the same class as them the next year. Amami then asks Maki to translate something for her, but as he teaches her, Umi suddenly scoots in and grabs his hand under the table, causing him to lose focus. While tutoring Seki, Ume gets even more romantic with Maki's hands and smiles at him. Shortly afterwards, Maki finally serves some pancakes, and it makes Amami so excited that she starts geeking out like Gear 5 Luffy at the table while Seki stares at her with loving eyes. Umi notices a piece of cream on Maki's face, so she wipes it and licks her arm, and they start teasing each other while the other two watch in shock. When the lovebirds finally notice them, they tell them to save the romance for when they're alone, so Maki and Umi apologize. Amami starts yapping about how she wants a nice guy like Maki who makes snacks and hangs out, but Umi says she needs someone with high specs like Usain Bolt instead because no one could keep up with her energy. However, the noodle brain concludes that the only one with enough high specs for her is Umi, and she hugs her tightly while joking about how she wants to create a clone of her. Hours later, they thank Maki for hosting them, but as Amami and Seki leave, Umi asks them to wait in the hallway so she can talk to her hubby about something. Once they leave, Umi hugs Maki from behind and confesses that she was concerned when she heard Amami say she wants a guy like him because she's sure she'd be traumatized for life if she ever loses him. He asks her to let go of him for a second, but she says she doesn't want him to see the state of her face. However, the Riz King says he's already seen her crying before, so she finally lets go, and he tells her that he only has eyes for her, which makes her so happy that she cuddles him again. A while later, Maki is waiting outside a restaurant for his dad, and Maki texts him, offering to join him if he's too nervous, but he assures her that he'll be fine, so they start playing around with the different ways they plan to devour each other's forbidden fruits. Just then, Itsuki arrives, and they enter the restaurant, where Maki orders the most expensive foods on the menu, and this surprises Itsuki, so he explains that it's been a while since they last had dinner. After eating, Maki asks Itsuki if he still loves Masaki, but he says he doesn't feel that way anymore, even though he respects her for all the effort she put in as a wife. He then asks the deadbeat if he fell out of love with Masaki because of Kyuka, and this gives Itsuki the confirmation he needs that Maki was the one he saw the other day, so he asks if Umi was a friend. Maki says they became friends a while ago and asks him what the story is with Kyuka, so he explains that he never cheated on Masaki with her because they started hanging out long after he divorced Masaki. When Maki asks if he loves her, Itsuki admits that he does and tells him that he needs to rush out for work. As Maki tries to stop him, Nina suddenly starts crashing out in the corner, so Maki asks her what's wrong, and she explains that she doesn't have enough money to cover the bill because her lousy boyfriend stood her up. However, Itsuki introduces himself and offers to pay for her meal because he sees her as a dear friend to his son, but Maki puts on his big boy shorts and says he'll pay for her instead because she's his friend before telling Itsuki to stop acting like he's family anymore. While leaving to settle the bill, Maki angrily asks Itsuki if he loves Kyuka one more time, and the old scumbag says he'll understand someday, so he angrily leaves. Shortly afterwards, Maki and Nina are drinking coffee together on a bench, and she advises him to stop stressing over his dad, so he won't bum out Umi. When Maki returns home, Masaki tells him she's taking some time off work to fix her mental health, and he thinks she should stop smoking as well. The next morning, the lovebirds are walking together, and Umi invites Maki to come over for dinner at her house since her family requested it, and he tries to decline, but she refuses to let him. At school, Maki tells Amami and Seki about Umi's home invitation, and she apologizes for his loss, but this confuses him because he knows the airhead would usually start begging to join, and he wonders if Umi's dad is as scary as Brock Lesnar. However, Umi explains that her dad isn't scary, and the person Amami is scared of is her older brother Riku, but Maki worries that her Umi's big bro could slime him for dating her. Seki calls him lucky for having a family dinner right before a Christmas party, but Maki informs him that he didn't register, so Seki promises him that he'll talk to his sister to get him a spot. When they meet his sister, Maki is shocked to see that it's the student council president, and when Seki asks her to make a spot for Maki, she says it's possible because many people have cancelled. Maki then asks her humbly to take a spot, and she agrees because they need a fill-in for one of the student council members who cancelled. But she explains that he won't participate in the games since he's a staff member. This makes everyone happy, but Maki is the happiest because he'll get to spend Christmas Eve with his glorious queen. Later that evening, Maki dresses up in a typical weeb outfit, and Masaki is on the phone with Sora, thanking her for inviting her son over. After she ends the call, Maki tells her she didn't have to call them, but she says she wanted to talk to Sora again. When he notices that she's carrying cigarettes, he asks her if Itsuki said anything to her, so she explains that Itsuki scolded her for putting a heavy burden on their son after finding out how busy her work has become. However, Maki says he doesn't have the right because they can't live freely if she doesn't work. But Masaki drops a bombshell, informing him that she didn't have to work at all to put food on the table since Itsuki has been sending her money every month. When Maki asks why she hasn't been using it, she explains that it's a matter of pride, because she wants to prove that she can handle things without touching any of his money, and work keeps her mind off a lot of things bothering her. She then apologizes to Maki for putting him through a lot but promises him that all of that is over now, because she'll always be there for him. Soon after, Maki arrives at Umi's house and hands Sora a gift from Masaki, so she invites him into the house. As he walks in, Umi notices that he's nervous, so she assures him that he'll be fine. She then takes him to her father, who introduces himself as Daichi, and Maki trembles like a moron while introducing himself back, so Daichi thanks him for looking out for his daughter. As they talk, Sora notices that Maki is tensed up, so she pulls Daichi's cheeks while telling him to drop the tension, and Umi joins in by tickling him from behind. After minutes of teasing, Maki promises to drop the tension if they let him go, so the girls finally release him, and he apologizes for embarrassing himself. Umi then asks them to start up dinner, so Sora tells Daichi to get her brother, and after she leaves, Maki asks Umi what her brother is like. Umi explains that her brother is an unemployed shut-in like you, but he started crawling towards Amami because he likes her, and Maki finally understands why Amami is scared to visit her. At the dinner table, Umi is annoyed that Sora is sitting right next to Maki, so she explains that she wants to show him the family hospitality firsthand since he's the first guest they've had in ages, and they start bickering until Daichi tells them to stop. While serving Maki some food, Umi invites him to play games with her afterwards, and he agrees to join her, so she tells Riku that they'll be using his room for it. Riku argues that he doesn't want them to invade his private sanctuary, but Umi tells him to get a job, and Daichi supports the motion, saying he should start job hunting from next Monday. As Maki watches them bond, tears drop from his eyes, and he remembers a time in his past when Masaki and Itsuki were living with him cheerfully as a family. Back then, he thought those times would last forever, but soon his family grew apart and eventually separated. Back in the present, Maki apologizes to them for suddenly crying, and they try to check on him, but he tearfully runs outside to clear his head. There, he expresses how pathetic he feels for acting like a crybaby in front of his hubby's family, but Umi suddenly arrives and tells him that she can't abandon him after seeing him in that state. However, he tells her that he wants to get alone and runs away, but she chases after him and hugs him before pointing out that his face is a mess. Maki apologizes, so she gives him a warm hug and tells him to entrust himself to her, since no one else is around there to make fun of him. Later, in Umi's room, he explains that he still hasn't gotten over his family drama, so she rests his head on her lap and tells him that he'll feel like himself again after he's had a good nap. Maki thanks her, and as he closes his eyes, Umi tells him that she'll always love him. Hours later, Maki wakes up on Umi's bed, and she tells him that she didn't want to leave the bed, even though she woke up an hour ago because she couldn't resist his sleeping face. She then asks him how it felt to sleep on her thick thighs, so he tells her it felt warm but complains that he hasn't done anything worthy of getting such treatment. However, Umi explains that he's done a lot to make her life better ever since they met, and they stare passionately into each other's eyes. As Maki leans in for a kiss, Sora interrupts and tells them to come to the living room for a talk. There, she advises them to think of a proper time and place to have their first kiss so that they won't end up in a mess like her and Daichi. Daichi then takes Maki outside and pats him on the head while advising him not to bottle up his feelings about his parents' situation, because his emotions will one day explode like a Russian nuke. However, Maki says it's better to hold it in, because he knows that his parents won't get back together even if he begs. But Daichi tells him that crying about it is worth it, since it helps him get a load off his chest. When Maki returns home, he sees a picture of his family living happily together, and this makes him cry as he wishes things could go back to how they were. After wiping off his tears, he decides that he'll make a bold move on Christmas Eve since it's the anniversary of the day his parents divorced. On the day of the Christmas party, the student council president Tomo holds a meeting with all the other students' council reps and reminds them that there's still a lot of work to do since they have to coordinate with other schools on the venue and final step. After the meeting, Maki meets up with her along with his friends and asks for permission to leave the party early for about 15 minutes, and she agrees to make it his break time, but tells Seki that he'll be working with her all 24 hours. Shortly afterwards, Amami asks Umi what her plan is, and she says it's to head to her house after grabbing lunch since she isn't planning to dress up much, but Amami teases her by bringing up how shy she was after finding out Maki was attending the party, so Umi crushes her empty skull as punishment. After Amami leaves, Umi asks Maki if he'll be okay, and he assures her that he'll be fine because he only needs her there when it's time. On the way home, Maki realizes that what he's planning to do isn't commendable, but he concludes that it's a bridge he has to cross to deal with the unresolved feelings he's been bottling up for so long, and he then meets up with Kyuka at a park. As they sit together, Maki asks Kyuka how his dad reacted to his request, and she explains that it got his head spinning since he already has plans he couldn't cancel, but she finds it understandable given that his son asked to discuss future plans with him. Earlier that day, Maki called Itsuki and informed him that he's aiming for a college that's close to his location and he's considering living with him if he gets in, so the deadbeat agreed to meet him to discuss further. While walking ahead, Kyuka says she's surprised because she thought Maki was a quiet boy, so Maki explains that he usually is but wanted to cause some trouble for the adults by throwing a tantrum. He then says he's surprised that she agreed to meet him, so she explains that she's worried because the man she loves is acting strangely, and she wants to support him any way she can. When he asks if she really loves Itsuki, she says she does because he stuck with her, even though she was the worst new hire among the crop, and made her who she currently is, which is why she admires and respects him as both a person and a man. She then bows her head and asks Maki not to wait till college before going back to live with Itsuki because she feels Itsuki needs him due to how lively he always seems when he talks about Maki. Hearing this, Maki points out that she's being thoughtless, and she admits that she is because she skipped work to be there, and she knows his mom would be deeply hurt by her request, but she claims that she's ready to accept any punishment and even avoid Maki if he doesn't want to see her again. When he asks about his dad, she says she's ready to quit her job and leave his life, and Maki is shocked by her seriousness, but he refuses her offer anyway and asks her if she's free later. Later at the Christmas party, Maki is ushering guests in when Tomo arrives and tells him to call her by her name instead of president, since she wouldn't be the president again after that year. Once she leaves, Amami arrives in a dress more dazzling than Rihanna's Met Gala outfit, and Umi arrives as well in a gorgeous gown that makes Maki speechless. He then compliments Umi's look and watches as she plays around with Amami, but Nina arrives, so Umi asks why she's not with her boyfriend like she promised. Nina explains that she's been through a lot and asks the girls to help get her mind off things, and Amami agrees since they'll have more fun with her around. Just then, Seki arrives and informs Maki that it's time for him to take off, so he takes off his Christmas hat and bids Umi farewell. As the party begins, Maki meets up with his mom in the yard, and she asks why he called her there, but he tells her to wait a little since he's expecting a call. When his phone rings, Maki answers and gives Itsuki the green light, so he arrives with Kyoka, and Maki apologizes for lying to both of them. He then asks Itsuki and Masaki to talk to each other since it's been a while they talk, but Masaki introduces herself to Kyuka and tells her in a salty tone to do what she wants with Itsuki. Kyuka says she doesn't have the right, and Masaki tells Itsuki that she isn't surprised that he's still making women cry, but he replies nonchalantly, so she angrily tells him to talk back instead of being evasive as he usually is. However, Itsuki tries to leave, but Kyuka holds her back and tells him not to turn his back on Maki again because she knows he misses his son dearly. Maki then holds both his parents' hands and begs them to make up so that they could go back to how things used to be because he doesn't want to have to choose between them. As tears stream down Amaki's face, he promises to do whatever it takes for them if they can just unite once more so that he can be with both of them. But Umi suddenly arrives, so he apologizes for dumping all that on them when it's already too late. While holding Umi's hand, he tells Itsuki that he never intended to stay at his place because he's already fallen in love in their town, and as a final request, he asks his parents to take a picture with him by the Christmas tree, and they agree. He then asks Umi to take the picture, but she calls their other friends, who were eavesdropping the whole time, and Nina takes the picture of Maki and his parents. Afterwards, they have fun at the Christmas party together, but Sanae and Manaka arrive, so Umi tells Maki about how guilty she feels for ending her friendship with them in a harsh way. Maki says he wants her to make up with them, so when they arrive, Umi apologizes for not being nicer to them after finding out their betrayal, and this makes them cry, so they all hold hands and joke together about their newly rekindled friendship. After the party, Maki meets up with Umi, who shows him the fun photos she took of everyone by the Christmas tree, and he feels happy because he used to hate how he looked in pictures until Umi arrived and changed him. He then tells Umi that he loves her and officially asks her to be his girlfriend, so she cries and hugs him, causing him to cry as well. As they hold each other, Maki suddenly laughs, so she calls him a meanie for teasing her, and they share their very first passionate kiss. The next day, Maki and Umi are chilling at Maki's place after stuffing themselves with Domino's pizza, and Maki is still trying to process the fact that he and Umi officially started dating on Christmas Eve. Umi starts teasing him by poking his flabby tummy, and Maki tries to return the gesture, but he doesn't find any fat on Umi's hot, slender body, so she reminds him that she trains harder than Saitama regularly. However, she admits that she's added a bit of weight, and asks him to feel up her arm to find out, claiming that he's the only one in the world that has permission to do so. With his face glowing red, Maki asks if it's because he's her boyfriend, and this makes her blush as well while admitting that it is, so he pinches her arm until she pushes him away and reminds him that they need to study for their upcoming test. She then informs him that it's time for her to go home, but she rests on his body while confessing that she doesn't want to go, so Maki admits that he also wants to spend more time with her. However, Umi reminds him that they promised their moms and begs him with a puppy dog face to carry her, so Maki lifts her like Cinderella, but his waist immediately gives out. Soon after, Maki and Umi arrive at a spot where Umi tells him it's fine to go back since she's in the mood to walk the rest of the way herself, so they wave each other goodbye. The next morning, Maki wakes up feeling extremely sick, and after seeing that his temperature is high, he loads himself with drugs. However, he's surprised that it took this long for his body to finally break, because he's gone through a lot in the past month, and since his mom has gone back to work, he decides to spend the next couple of days dealing with it himself. He then informs Umi about his condition via text, and she arrives minutes later with her mom, who offers to drive him to the hospital. When he asks how they got a key to his house, Umi explains his mom gave it to Sora when they went drinking the previous night, and Sora adds that Masaki made the key for Umi because she figured they'd be spending more time together since they started dating. At the hospital, Umi is trembling in fear while waiting for Maki, but Maki returns from the lab and informs them that it's just a common cold that should go down in a few days. Sora tells him she messaged Misaki for him and asks him to come to their house to get some rest. On the way there, Sora brings up how Umi woke her up frantically that morning like Godzilla had appeared in their town because of Maki's illness, so Umi holds Maki's hand while explaining that she was extremely worried because Maki was perfectly fine the previous night, and she didn't want to be unable to see him anymore since they just started dating. Hearing this, Maki apologizes, but she calls him an idiot for falling sick, which makes him feel bad that he's already upset her within 24 hours of them dating. At Umi's place, Maki asks if he's staying there until he recovers, so Umi assures him that they already got permission from his mom, and to quell his worries, she gives him a warm hug. Deep down, Maki still feels that he doesn't deserve to be the boyfriend of such an amazing girl because he's still a loser who gets sick easily, and he fears that she may get sick of him someday and leave. However, Umi places his head tightly on her plots and tells him that she loves him how he is, so he apologizes for giving negative vibes. Later that night, Maki is resting on the bed, but Umi shows up to check on him, so he assures her that he'll be fine. Despite this, she still keeps spying on him, and when he notices her, she enters the room and tells him she doesn't want to leave him alone. Maki worries that she'll catch his cold, but she insists on staying by his side, so he tells her to nurse him back to health, which makes her super excited. While holding his hand, Umi asks him to be as bratty as he wants because she intends to spoil him to bits while he's there, so he calmly goes to sleep. When Maki wakes up, Umi feeds him some food, but Daichi is worried that this could lead to intense cracking later on, so Sora assures him that it's impossible since Maki is sick unless Umi makes the first move. Umi then turns off the lights and goes to sleep beside Maki, and Maki smiles while telling Umi that he loves her. He adores her sleeping face so much that he tries to pet her but stops himself when he remembers that he'll wake her. However, Umi reveals that she's been awake this whole time and asks him to say it again, so he places his hands on her cheek while telling her that she loves her, and she tells him right back with a warm smile on her face. The next morning, Maki sees that his fever has gone down, so he informs Umi, who already left home to hang out with Amami and Nina. As he rests in bed, Sora arrives to clean the room, and she thanks him for making Umi much more cheerful and expressive than she used to be. She then tells him about how cheerful Umi gets whenever she talks about him and begs him to always be there for her, so he promises her that he'll always be there to support her. Soon after, Umi returns home with Amami and Nina, and they start a cheerful conversation with Maki in his room, but the airheaded girls start play fighting for no reason. Following this, Maki spends the next week recuperating in Maki's home, and he eventually becomes well again, so he tells Umi that he's going back home for New Year's. This makes her sad, so she asks him to kiss her, and he gives her a warm smooch, which makes her smile. On New Year's Day, Maki compliments Amami and Nina for their cute yukatas, but eventually his queen arrives, looking like an actual Japanese goddess, so he tells Umi that she looks beautiful. Maki and the girls say a prayer at the shrine together, and Maki pulls a fortune card, which says that all his prayers will come true, but Umi reveals that she has the same card. When Umi asks what he prayed for, Maki says he hopes all the people in his life spend the year happy and healthy, so Umi wishes for the same thing. Afterwards, Maki holds Umi's hand while walking to meet the others, and he decides that he'll do everything he can to be there for her as her boyfriend. That's it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed and watch this video on screen.